Luther said I could learn something from you. I already know how to drink.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Today on the Classic Movie Reviews podcast, we are taking on The Sting, 1973. This movie won 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing, Story and Screenplay based on factual material or material not previously published or produced. It was written by a lawyer. Best Art Direction, Set Direction, Best Costume Design, and that was the great Edith Head. Best Film Editing, and Best Music, scoring original song score and or adaptation. This film was also nominated for Best Actor for Robert Redford, Best Cinematography, and Best Sound. The film is rated 8.3 on imdb.com, which is pretty darn good. Rotten Tomatoes has the film at 94% on the tomato meter and 95% audience approval. So again, not too shabby. On December 26, 1973, New York Times film critic Vincent Canby stated, quote, George Roy Hill and stars Paul Newman and Robert Redford of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in a comedy about a couple of exuberant con men operating in and around Chicago in 1936. The Sting looks and sounds like a musical comedy from which the songs have been removed, leaving only a background score of old-fashioned, toe-tapping piano rags that has easily evoked the pre-World War I teens as the 1930s. A lot of the other period details aren't too firmly anchored in time, but the film is good-natured, so obviously aware of everything it's up to, even its own picturesque fraud. That I opt to go along with it. One forgives its unrelenting effort to charm, if only because The Sting itself is a kind of a con game, devoid of the poetic aspirations that weighted down Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Mr. Newman and Mr. Redford, dressed in best fit-to-kill snap-brim hats, 30s splendor, looking like a couple of guys in old Arrow shirt ads, are more or less reprising their roles in Butch Cassidy. Mr. Newman is Henry Gondorff, the older con artist in charge of the instruction of Johnny Hooker, Mr. Redford, the bright, eager younger man who yearns to make what the movie calls the big con, swindle. The way tap dancers in the movies about the 20s wanted to play the palace, unquote. Great film critic Roger Ebert rated this movie 4 stars. The film was placed on the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. I wanted to cover this film between the film noirs that I've been covering and the neo-noirs that I will start including. However, this film is in no way any type of noir. This important movie was a major hit. I feel that this film in many ways bridges the gap between traditional and neo-noir. It got the country in the mood to re-embrace criminals and rascals. The soundtrack was great as well. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Robert Shaw is extraordinary in the role of the crabby criminal and killer Doyle Lonigan. Shaw was first covered in The Battle of the Bulge, 1965. Paul Newman played veteran grifter Henry Gondorff. Newman was born in Ohio in 1925. His father was Jewish and was prosperous as a sporting goods store owner. Newman began acting in grade school and continued through high school. He began at Ohio University but was expelled for unruly behavior. He began naval pilot training but had to quit because he was colorblind. He became an aviation gunner and radio operator. He was assigned to the Pacific Theater but did not see major action. Following the war, Newman completed his B.A. at Ohio's Kenyon College. He spent a year at Yale School of Drama before moving to New York. In New York, he joined the Actors Studio. Newman made his Broadway debut in 1953. His first movie was the Tights and Fights epic The Silver Chalice, 1954. Newman was never happy with this movie, and Indiana Jones did a better job searching for the Cup of Christ. Newman did much better with the boxer Rocky Graziano story, Somebody Up There Likes Me, 1956. He continued with 2 William Faulkner films, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, 1958, for which he received a Best Actor Oscar nomination, and The Long Hot Summer, 1958. That same year, he was the blue-eyed Billy the Kid in The Left-Handed Gun, 1958. Exodus 1960 was one of his greatest films. The following year, he performed in one of his top 3 roles, The Hustler, 1961, where he received a Best Actor Oscar nomination. For HUD, 1963, and his seminal role, Cool Hand Luke, 1967, he received 2 more Best Actor nominations. Newman turned in great performances in Hombre, 1967, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, also with Redford, and Sometimes a Great Notion, 1971. Although I don't care for the movie, The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, 1972, has a strong cult following, and they will wrestle with you if you say bad things about this movie. He was pretty darn good in The Sting, 1973, and was in one of the early disaster films, The Towering Inferno, 1974. The hockey spoof Slapshot, 1977, is an irreverent laugh-a-minute. He received a Best Actor Oscar nomination for Absence of Malice, 1981, and The Verdict, 1982, still without winning. He continued his role from The Hustler, 1961, in The Color of Money, 1986. This time, he was given the Oscar for Best Actor. Later films include Blaze, 1989, Fat Man and Little Boy, 1989, which is pretty good, Nobody's Fool, 1994, and Road to Perdition, 2002. For the last 2, he was again nominated for a Best Actor Oscar. Newman spent his later years as a philanthropist. He died in 2008. Robert Redford played the apprentice grifter Johnny Hooker. Redford was born in 1936 in California. After high school, Redford attended the University of Colorado on a baseball scholarship. He lost his scholarship as a result of his drinking. After he left the university, he wandered the country for a time, and he also worked in the oil fields of California. When he had saved enough money, he went to Europe to study art. Upon his return, he planned to be a theatrical designer, but ended up acting. He enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He was in the hit Barefoot in the Park, but would not become a movie star until the movie was made 5 years later. He has an impressive string of good movies that I will try to go through quickly. These films include Barefoot in the Park, 1967, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, Great Ending, Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here, 1969, Jeremiah Johnson, 1972, Tough Guy, definitely not Zach Galifianakis, The Candidate, 1972, The Sting, 1973, Great Grift, The Way We Were, 1973, The Great Gatsby, 1974, The Great Waldo Pepper, 1975, awesome biplane movie, 3 Days of the Condor, 1975, fantastic spy movie, All the President's Men, 1976, investigative journalism the way it should be, A Bridge Too Far, 1977, an amazing anti-war film, The Electric Horseman, 1979, great burnt-out drunken cowboy movie, Brubaker, 1980, The Natural, 1984, one of the best baseball movies, Out of Africa, 1985, Legal Eagles, 1986, Havana, 1990, Sneakers, 1992, Indecent Proposal, 1993, and The Horse Whisperer, 1998. After that, not so much that was good. He has done great as a director with films like Ordinary People, 1980, for which he won the Best Director Oscar, Very Funny, The Milagro Beanfield War, 1988, The Great A River Runs Through It, 1992, and Quiz Show, 1994, where he earned another Best Director Oscar nomination. Eileen Brennan played brothel Madam Billy. Brennan was born in Los Angeles in 1932. Her father was a doctor, and her mother was listed as a minor silent film actor, but I cannot find her on IMDb.com. Brennan attended Georgetown University, where she was active in theater. She later attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. She was successful in off-Broadway plays, a talented comedian, so she sought work in very complex theater roles to expand her range. In 1967, she began working on television. Her big movie break came when she was in The Last Picture Show, 1971. Of course, Brennan was great in a relatively small role in The Sting, 1973. She was in the mystery crime spoof Murder by Death, 1976. Another role she was known for is the really mean drill captain in Private Benjamin 1980. Do drill captains exist? The movie was made into a television show by the same name that ran from 1981 to 83. In the second year of the series, Brennan was hit by a car and had to spend almost 3 years rehabbing. She also became addicted to painkillers during that time. Brennan returned to movies as Miss Peacock in Clue 1985. In 1990, she suffered from breast cancer but kept working in films like Miss Congeniality 2, Armed and Fabulous 2005. She died in 2013 at the age of 80. Robert Earl Jones played a grifter, Luther Coleman, whose murder started the action of the movie. Jones began acting in 1939. He ended his career with 29 film and television credits. Some of his better-known films are Odds Against Tomorrow 1959, The Sting 1973, Witness 1985, Sleepaway Camp 1983, and Trading Places 1983. He is the father of legendary actor James Earl Jones. Robert Earl died in 2006. Veteran actor Charles Durning, who played Lieutenant William Snyder, my favorite Martian Ray Walston as J.J. Singleton, and Dana Elcar, who played FBI Agent Polk, will be covered in future podcasts. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The movie credits begin with an amazing syncopated rhythm piano tune as the characters and actors are introduced. The year is 1936, and the location is Joliet, Illinois. NRA posters are in the window, and the Great Depression is in full swing. A man much better dressed than the rest of the locals ascends a stairway where the bookie cash is coming in and being collected. The manager of the bookie station is reporting in to the head at the syndicate. The man, Matola, James Sloyan, is given about 10 grand in an envelope to take to Chicago. A limping black man, Luther, Robert Earl Jones, is chasing another man and yelling that the man has stolen his wallet. Matola steps out of the way. The man with the money is Erie Kid, Jack Kehoe. Crossing in the other direction, Johnny Hooker, Robert Redford, tosses his suitcase, stopping the thief. Erie pulls a knife but runs away without fighting. Matola and Hooker run to the wounded Luther, who is on the ground bleeding from a knife cut in the leg. Hooker offers to call the cops, but Luther says no cops. Luther looks through his wallet and is loaded with cash and stuffed envelopes. Luther says he has to get the money to the local mob by 4 p.m. Luther offers Hooker and Motella a C-note to make the drop. Hooker flatly refuses, but Motella accepts. When Motella begins to leave with the money, Hooker stops him and tells him he needs to hide the money. He takes Luther's money and all of Motella's money and wraps it in a handkerchief. Then he demos to Motella how to hide it inside the crotch of his pants. Luther and Hooker watch Motella leave. He jumps into a cab and heads for the train station. He pulls the bag from his pants, and it's all cut paper. This is a variation of the gypsy switch, where you place something in a handkerchief and make the switch to something of no value. This was mentioned in Nightmare Alley 1947, when Lilith gave Stan a stack of paper. In the next scene, Luther and Hooker are shown running away from the minor sting. They find an alley and open the handkerchief. They find out that they have scored $10,000. Hooker goes right away to buy a new suit, flowers, and a bottle for his girl that is working burlesque strip clubs. Hooker convinces Crystal, Sally Kirkland, to skip work and go on a date with him. The couple goes to a speakeasy that has a roulette table. Hooker puts $3,000 on red. The pit boss signals to the dealer to push a button. Hooker is broken. Crystal heads out. Somewhere in Chicago, a hood reports to the higher-up that Mottola has lost almost $10,000 to a couple of con artists. The Chicago man calls the big boss in New York. This call is filtered through a couple of henchmen, including Flat-Nosed Floyd, Charles Dyer Cop, before it is relayed to the big boss, Doyle Lonigan, Robert Shaw. Lonigan orders the two grifters, they haven't connected Erie, killed by some local people. The now broke Hooker shows up at the apartment of his partners, Luther and Erie. He is friends with Luther's wife and family. Hooker does deliver the cuts to his partners, so he is honest. Luther chews Hooker out for flashing money. Luther announces that he will retire. He tells Hooker that he is good and he should connect with his old friend Henry Gondorf, Paul Newman, and learn how to run the long con. Hooker and Erie head out. The cops cut the two grifters off. Lieutenant William Snyder, Charles Durning, beats Hooker and tells him that he has made a big score against a numbers runner and needs a friend. Snyder wants 2 G's to keep Hooker's name away from Lonigan. Hooker hands over $1,000. Erie wonders where Hooker got the payoff money. Hooker says he gave the cop only counterfeit money. Then he runs and calls and warns Luther. No answer, so he runs to Luther's house. Luther is dead, having been thrown from a second-story window. Hooker flees the area. The setup. Hooker travels to the Windy City to find Gondorf. Billy, Eileen Brennan, tells Hooker that Gondorf is not there until he mentions Luther. Gondorf lives in a small room behind a merry-go-round. There is a brothel above. Hooker goes into the room, and Gondorf is a drunken bum. Hooker soaks him in the shower until he comes to.
Glad to meet you, kid. You're a real horse's ass.
Luther said I could learn something from you. I already know how to drink.
Gondorf says that he blew a big deal and had to lay off the cons. He says the feds are still following him. Finally, Gondorf realizes that Lonigan may be after Hooker also. Floyd reports to Lonigan about Luther being killed and Hooker getting away. Lonigan says that if the other Chicago gangsters find out he can be beaten, they will all come after him. So Hooker must be killed. Hooker says he wants to play the big con against Lonigan. Gondorf wants him to slow down. He finally sees Hooker is dead serious about the con. Gondorf agrees. Luther had a lot of friends, so there will be no trouble getting the guys together for the con. The process begins with Hooker being cleaned and clothed, so he looks big time. He gets a room. As the grifters come in, they touch the side of their nose as a signal. They meet at Gondorf's room. Eddie Niles, John Heffernan, has joined and collects the intel. Kid Twist, Harold Gould, and J.J. Singleton, Ray Walston, are there as well. Billy goes back into the brothel, and Snyder is there. He wants to search the place looking for Hooker. Billy tells him that the chief of police is in the back. J.J. says that the only vice Lonigan has is playing poker while traveling by train from New York to Chicago. He also says he cheats. Gondorf proposes they use the wire con. The plan is to play Lonigan on the train and get him to Chicago for the big hook. The hook. Eddie and Kid Twist rent an old billiard parlor for the operation. They rent the pool hall and a room with a view of the alley. They rent all of the needed equipment from Benny Garfield, Avon Long. Gondorf and Hooker get on the same train with Lonigan. Gondorf as Shaw contacts the head porter about the game. Kid Twist goes to see his old friends about getting the people to run the wire. Snyder shows up looking for Hooker. Erie is there and tries to hide his face. Snyder sees him and eventually bashes his nose into the table. On the train, J.J. brings in the marked decks to use against Lonigan. Billy bumps Lonigan and takes his wallet, which she drops off with Hooker. Hooker takes the money to Gondorf. Gondorf goggles with gin and uses it for aftershave. He cuts the bottle with water. Gondorf shows up late for the game and acts drunk and low down.
All right, gentlemen, should we not wait for him?
Let's go.
I think that's a good idea.
Mr. Clemens, give me the cards.
Sorry I'm late, guys. I was taking a crap.
He gets under Lonigan's skin right away by mispronouncing his name. Floyd is sitting behind Gondorf. Kid Twist interviews the talent. Even though Erie has a busted nose, they let him on the team. All of the gear is brought into the pool hall, and it looks like an off-track betting parlor. The game goes into the night until it comes down to Gondorf, Lonigan, and another man. They take a break, and Lonigan has Floyd fix him up a winning deck. Lonigan switches the deck into the game. Gondorf has 3 threes. Lonigan has 2 nines. The other player folds. Gondorf takes 2 cards, and now he has 4 threes. Lonigan takes 2, and now he has 4 nines. They raise the bets until everything is in, including another $10,000. Lonigan lays down his 4 nines. Gondorf lays down his 4 jacks. He has won $15,000 off of Lonigan, plus the $15K that he stole in the wallet. Lonigan doesn't have his wallet to pay, and Gondorf accuses him of welching. Gondorf says he will send a boy around to pick up the money. As Hooker goes to get the money, Floyd can't figure out how Gondorf cheated him. Hooker, under the name Kelly, goes in with Lonigan. Hooker tells Lonigan that Shaw cheated and stole his wallet. Lonigan wants to kill the two, but he is too close to the station. Hooker says he wants to take down Shaw. Lonigan takes Hooker home, and Hooker explains the entire deal. Hooker tells Lonigan where to meet him if he wants to help take down Kelly. When Hooker gets back to his room, two killers shoot at him, but he escapes on a street sweeper. Hooker makes it back to the operation. The tale. Lonigan, Floyd, and the bodyguard go to the office that got clipped. He chews out one of the hitmen for missing Hooker. He tells him to put Salino, who is their best, on the job. The office head says Cole, Brad Sullivan, will try to make the hit. Lonigan says if he does, he will tangle with Salino. Kid Twist is in an apartment where he can watch the drugstore and betting site. Hooker is in the drugstore, and Gondorf is at the betting site. Lonigan sneaks in the back way. Hooker explains that the drugstore phone will call with a horse, and Lonigan will have 2 to 3 minutes to place the bet at the betting site. Kid Twist gets a call on the horse, and he relays it to the drugstore by phone. When Lonigan and his guys go to the betting place, it is jammed with grifters acting like bettors. JJ is reading the racing results in the back over a loudspeaker. Shaw comes out and insults Lonigan about not paying off on money he owes. Lonigan puts down the bet and waits. The correct horse wins, and Lonigan thinks the scheme will work. Shaw, Gondorf, tells him to leave his goons at home from now on. Shaw chews out Kelly for effect. Hooker comes to see Lonigan and explains that next week they will make a $400,000 bet at 5 to 1 to hit Shaw for $2 million. Lonigan knows that they are past posting but wants to know how.
Well, what'd I tell you?
You got lucky once, that's not enough.
Oh, lucky hell. I can do it every time.
Why don't you then?
Because it's better to do it all at once. We're going to put down 400 grand next week. At 5 to 1 odds, that's $2 million. 20% of that is yours if you stick with it.
Got a system, Kelly?
No. You can still lose with the system.
You're past posting, aren't you?
Could be.
How?
You going to stay in?
Not till I get some answers.
Hooker says he has a friend that works at the Western Union. He holds the results until he can call Hooker, and then he releases the results. Lonigan gives Kelly $1,000 and says he wants to meet his partner at 3 p.m. the next day. The gloved hands of a person in a car is shown looking at Hooker, and it is probably Salino. Hooker calls Kid Twist about needing a partner for Lonigan to meet. As he finishes the call, Snyder busts the glass and points a gun at Hooker. Hooker slams the door on his hand and gets away by jumping off the elevated train platform. Hooker tells Gondorf about Snyder, but he keeps a secret about the assassins. The Wire. Hooker stops by a local diner where he is served by the indifferent and hostile Loretta, Demetria Arliss. In another part of town, JJ and Kid Twist are dressed as painters. Hooker drops a big tip on her trying to get her attention. JJ and Kid Twist go to the Western Union office and insist that they are there to paint the boss's office. Lonigan and gang pick up Hooker and head for the Western Union office. JJ and Kid Twist act like they are going to paint the room, and the boss leaves. Kid Twist takes off his coveralls and sits at the desk like it is his. He even has a picture of him and his family on the desk with actress Kathleen Freeman as his wife. Kid Twist shows Lonigan that the office is being painted, so they leave for another location. JJ walks out, also leaving the wall half painted. Lonigan says after another test, he will finance the entire operation. Snyder is in a diner when 2 FBI agents come in and tell him that Special Agent Polk, Dana Elcar, would like to talk to him. They take Snyder to a warehouse where the FBI is running an operation. Polk says he knows Hooker and Gondorf are running a scheme. He wants Snyder to pick up Hooker so they won't know the feds are involved. They tell Snyder that Hooker is going to set up Gondorf for them. The shutout. Lonigan comes into the drugstore for the tip so he can place his second test bet. The scammers don't have enough money to pay off, so they plan to use the shutout with Lonigan. JJ finds the race. Billy calls it in to Kid Twist, who phones it into the drugstore where Lonigan is waiting. In the betting parlor, they form a line at the betting window, so Lonigan is delayed until the race starts and he can't place his bet. The correct horse wins, so Lonigan's greed kicks in. Lonigan says he will be back the next day with the money. Loretta is at the diner when Hooker goes for supper. He asks her for a date, but she refuses. Hooker sees a man outside. He asks Loretta to go to the bathroom and open the window and wait. Hooker goes out of the front and makes eye contact with the shooter. He runs back in the diner and the gunman follows him into the bathroom. Hooker is hiding in the stall with Loretta. After the gunman leaves, Hooker runs out the front and almost runs into him. Hooker flees down a blind alley and has to hide under a manhole cover. An unseen Salino comes in and puts 2 bullets in the hitman. Hooker makes it back to his apartment, but Snyder is there and gets the jump on him. They haul him to the FBI warehouse. Polk tells Hooker that they have him on counterfeiting. He has to let them know when the sting is going down and that Hooker would walk. Hooker says it's no deal, but they say they will convict Luther's wife too. He is forced to go along with the betrayal of Gondorf. He says that he must be allowed to take down Lonigan first. Hooker is acting weird around Gondorf. Hooker goes out and ends up at the diner where Loretta is working. When she closes, he follows her to her boarding house. Creeper. He invites her out on a date. She lets him in and he stays the night. A person across the way is watching the room. The person turns the light off with a gloved hand, so it is assumed to be Solino. Billy spends the night with Gondorf, and he is worried about the sting. The sting. On the morning of the sting, Hooker leaves Loretta's apartment. She is already gone, bag and baggage. He has not been robbed. Gondorf tucks a gun into his tuxedo. The gloved person prepares his pistol and puts on a silencer. When they finally show him, he looks like Al Capone. At another place, the money is delivered to Lonigan. Hooker is on edge as he eats at the diner. Gondorf looks around the merry-go-round as a final farewell. Hooker opens up some kind of cap and puts it in his mouth. Hooker calls into Polk and lets him know that the scam is going down. The Al Capone-looking guy watches Hooker come outside. Walking down the alley towards Hooker is the sharply dressed and calm Loretta. The Al Capone guy steps out and shoots Loretta. Hooker is stunned, but the shooter tells him that she is Salino.
She was going to kill you, kid. Her name's Loretta Salino. Lonigan's people set her up in the diner.
Damn! I didn't see that coming the first time I watched the movie. She had a gun with a silencer on it as well. The Al Capone guy was put on the job by Gondorf. The FBI head out for their raid. Polk tells Snyder to get the mark out quickly because he's a big shot. Lonigan goes to the drugstore to wait for the call. JJ and Billy find the race and call it into Lonigan. They say place it on Lucky Dan in the 3rd at Riverside Park. Lonigan goes to the betting parlor to make the bet. This time they let him place the bet. Lonigan places the bet as $500,000 on Lucky Dan to win at 4-1. JJ starts reading the race on the loudspeaker. Kid Twist comes in and Lonigan says he put the money on Lucky Dan to win. Kid Twist says no, he said to place it or bet that the horse would come in second.
Sorry, but you couldn't wait. Everything going all right?
You got nothing to worry about. I put it all on Lucky Dan. $500,000 to win.
To win. He said place. Place it on Lucky. That horse is gonna run second.
Lonigan freaks out and tries to get his money back. Polk, Snyder, and the FBI raid the betting parlor. Polk walks over to Hooker and tells him he can go. Gondorf pulls his gun and shoots Hooker, who bleeds out of his mouth. Polk shoots Gondorf. Snyder hustles Lonigan out. Finally, Polk tells Hooker that Lonigan is gone, and he sits up. Gondorf is not shot either.
He's gone.
Okay, Henry. All clear.
Polk was part of the scam to take care of Snyder and get Lonigan out without his money. Hooker says the scam was not enough to revenge Luther, but it was close. They begin breaking down and the money will be split that night. Hooker doesn't take his share because he will only blow it. He and Gondorf walk off down the alley. I'll be back with conclusions and the world-famous summary following a word from our sponsors. Summary. The film was primarily shot on a Universal backlot. It has a lot of connections to other films. The diner where Hooker meets Lonigan to take the phone call is the same one that Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly first met his father in Back to the Future 1985. Hooker lost his stolen money on a roulette wheel early in the movie, and this is the same location where Rick Blaine helped the young Bulgarian couple win enough money. to pay for their exit visa, stopping the bride from having to sleep with Captain Renault, played by Claude Rains in Casablanca 1942. Old-style image boards were shown between the sections of the film. This gives the feel of an older picture. For the Sting section, there is a racehorse wearing blue and white blinders. They are the colors that the horse Secretariat wore while winning the Triple Crown the same year as the film was made. This was the first Best Picture Oscar for Universal Studios since All's Quiet on the Western Front in 1930. How are they still in business? Demetria Arliss played the role of Loretta/Salino, the hired killer. There was some talk about this actress, who was in Foxfire in 1982, not being attractive enough for Hooker/Robert Redford to be attracted to. The naysayers were overruled. I first saw this movie with my father. I mentioned to my father something about the unattractiveness of this actress. I was told I was an idiot and didn't know what I was looking at. She has grown on me over the years. Very sadly, The Sting 2, 1983 was made later. It paired Jackie Gleason and Mac Davis as Gondorf and Hooker. Oliver Reed was in as Lonigan. As much as I love Terry Garr, this film was one of the great wastes of time in my life. World famous short summary: you can't scam someone who is not greedy. I hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find connections to social media and email at the site at classicmovierev.com or in the podcast show notes. If you enjoyed this show, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed, you can tell a friend, colleague, or family member about the show or leave a review at Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show get found. If you want to comment, suggest a movie, or help out, contact me by email at jec@classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.